Hello guys, welcome back to my YouTube channel. I'm yours truly, David Nyaberi, and I'd like us to continue in our lessons whereby we were discussing about the European invasion of Africa and the process of colonization, the first topic of Form 3. And we began by discussing about the definition of the term scramble and partition. That is in our previous lesson. And we find that scramble is the process whereby the Europeans were rushing to acquire colonies in Africa. From there we say that partition is the process whereby these Europeans were dividing up or sharing regions in Africa among themselves. From there we discussed about the various methods that these Europeans used to acquire colonies in Africa. We mentioned about the use of treasury. We mentioned about divide and rule and the military conquest. Now, in our class today, we are going to focus on the factors or reasons that led to the scramble for Africa, whereby we will discuss about the political factors, social factors, economic factors, and the strategic factors or reasons. Now, right away, let's begin with the political factors. Now, the political factor number one is the unification of Germany. Now, this is whereby Germany emerged to be one of the most powerful nations in Europe. This is due to the Franco-Prussian War of the year 1870 to 1871, and France had lost its provinces of Alsace and Lorraine. Therefore, it had to compensate by acquiring colonies in Africa. Therefore, that's one of the political reasons for the scramble for Africa. The political factor number two is nationalism. And nationalism, I think you know that it is a sense of belonging to one's nation or state or country. Therefore, the Europeans viewed that it was prestigious to acquire colonies, and therefore citizens of many European nations asked their mother governments to acquire colonies for prestige. Thirdly, militarism is the other political factor. Therefore, various individuals in Europe wanted to rise through military ranks in Europe. Therefore, the way that they could rise through ranks is by acquiring colonies in Africa. Now, that is the third political factor that led to the scramble for Africa. Now, after focusing on the political factors that led to the scramble for Africa, let's focus on the economic factors for the scramble for Africa. Whereby, number one is the economic factor that led to the scramble for Africa. This is whereby some Europeans were carrying out trading activities in Africa. Therefore, they wanted protection from their mother countries, and that encouraged the scramble for Africa amongst the Europeans. The second economic factor is mineral wealth. Remember that Africa is very rich in various mineral deposits such as gold, copper, and many others. Therefore, the Europeans viewed that Africa had the potential of providing these minerals such as gold and the rest that we mentioned above. Therefore, that encouraged the scramble for Africa among the Europeans. Thirdly, the investment of surplus capital is the other economic factor or reason for the scramble for Africa. Now, due to the Industrial Revolution in Europe in the 19th century, there emerged rich or wealthy merchants in Europe, and therefore they had the need of investing their surplus capital, and therefore Africa was the place that they had to invest their surplus capital, and therefore that encouraged the scramble for Africa. The fourth one is the search for raw materials. Remember that during the Industrial Revolution in Europe in the 19th century, the industries required raw materials in order to run. Therefore, Africa had to provide raw materials to the industries in Europe. Therefore, that encouraged the scramble for colonies in Africa in order to obtain raw materials such as, let's say, coffee, tea, and sisal. Now, the fifth economic factor for the scramble for Africa is the search for markets. The Europeans viewed that Africa was a potential market for the finished goods from their industries, and therefore Africa provided a market for the industrial products that were manufactured in Europe, and therefore that encouraged the scramble for Africa. Now, those are some of the economic factors that led to the scramble for Africa. Now, after focusing on the economic factors that led to the scramble for Africa, let's move forward and look at the social factors. Various social factors led to the scramble for Africa, and number one is racialism. This is whereby the Europeans viewed that their skin color was superior than that of the Africans. Therefore, they viewed that the African continent was a dark one, and therefore they saw that it was their duty to colonize them. Now, that is one of the social factors that led to the scramble for Africa. The second one is the settlement of surplus population. Now, due to the agrarian and industrial revolution in the 19th century, Europe emerged to have a very large population. Therefore, they saw that Africa could settle the surplus population in Europe. Thirdly, abolition of slave trade is the other social factor. Slave trade was being carried out mostly in Africa in the 19th century. Therefore, there emerged humanitarians in Europe in the 19th century who were campaigning against slave trade. Therefore, they came into Africa in order to abolish slave trade. Therefore, that's another social factor that led to the scramble for Africa. Lastly, missionary activities contributed to the scramble of Africa. Now, missionaries had arrived in Africa by the 18th century. Therefore, they wanted protection from their mother countries. And as a result, we find that encouraged the scramble for colonies in Africa. Now, those are some of the social factors that contributed to the scramble for colonies in Africa. Now, after focusing on the economic factors that contributed to the scramble for Africa, let's now focus on the fourth factors or reasons that led to the scramble of Africa, which are the strategic factors. Therefore, there were various areas in Africa that were of strategic importance for the Europeans. For instance, Egypt, we have the lakes of the Congo River, the North African coast, the source of the River Nile, and West Africa. Now, I'd like you in the comments section to explain on how those areas contributed to the scramble for Africa. Thank you for watching this video, and I'd like you to share my video, share the link, comment, like, and subscribe to my YouTube channel. That marks the end of our lesson. We'll continue in the next time.